Chapter 30. The Tide Rises. Did Peebee's mother call? Graham said. Did she come home? Did Peebee phone the police? Oh, I hope this isn't a sad story, she said. Phoebe did go to the police. It was on the day that Mr. Berkway read us the poem about the tide and the traveler. A poem that upset both me and Phoebe, and I think it was what convinced her, finally, that she had to tell the police about her mother. Mr. Berkway leaped through the doorway in his usual style, waving his arms and saying, "What a day!" and "Isn't life glorious?" Phoebe leaned over to me and said, "He's faking it. He doesn't want anyone to know he's a filthy murderer." Mr. Berkway read a poem by Mr. Longfellow. It was called The Tide Rises. The tide falls over and over in the poem is the line. The tide rises and the tide falls. And the way Mr. Berkway read this poem, you could actually hear the tide rising and falling, rising and falling. In the poem, a traveler is hurrying towards a town, and it is getting darker and darker. And the sea calls to the traveler. Then the waves, with their soft white hands, wash out the traveler's footprints. The next morning, the day returns, but never more. Returns the traveler to the shore, and the tide rises and the tide falls. Mr. Berkway asked people for their reactions to this poem. Megan said it sounded soft and gentle, and it almost made her go to sleep. Gentle, I said. It's not gentle, it's terrifying. My voice was shaking, but I couldn't stop it. There is a person walking along the beach, and the night is getting black, and the person keeps looking behind him to see if someone is following, and just when he's looking behind him, a huge wave comes up and pulls him into the sea. A murderer, Phoebe said. I went barreling on as if it was my poem and I was an expert. The waves, with their soft white hands, grab the traveler. They drown him. They kill him. He's gone. Ben said, "Maybe he didn't drown. Maybe he just died like normal people die." Phoebe said, "He drowned." I said, "It isn't normal to die. It isn't normal. It's terrible." Megan said, "What about heaven? What about God?" Mary Lou said, "God? Is he in this poem?" Ben said, "Maybe dying could be normal and terrible." When the bell rang, I raced out of the room. Phoebe grabbed me. "Come on," she said. From her locker, she took the evidence, which she had brought from home, and we both ran the 6 blocks to the police station. I am not exactly sure why I went along with Phoebe. Maybe it was because of the poem about the traveler, or maybe it was because he had begun to believe in the I had begun to believe in the lunatic. Or maybe it was because Phoebe was taking some action, and I admired her for it. I wished I had taken some action when my mother left. I was not sure what I could have done, but I wished I had done something. Phoebe and I stood for 5 minutes outside the police station, trying to make our hearts slow down, and then we went inside and stood at the counter. On the other side of it, a thin man with thumpingly large ears was writing in a black book. "Excuse me," Phoebe said. "I'll be right with you," he said. "This is absolutely urgent. I need to speak to someone about a murderer," Phoebe said. He looked up quickly. "A murderer?" "Yes," Phoebe said, "or possibly a kidnapping, but the kidnapping might turn into a murder." "Is this a joke?" "No, it is not a joke," Phoebe said. "Just a minute." He went to a plump woman dressed in a dark blue uniform. He whispered to her, and she turned to look at us. She came to the counter and leaned over it. She wore big, round glasses with thick lenses. "Is there something I can help you with?" she asked. When Phoebe explained, the woman smiled. "Is this something you girls have read about in a book, perhaps?" "No, it is not," I said. That was a turning point, I think. When I came to Phoebe's defense, I didn't like the way the woman was looking at us, as if we were two fools. I wanted the woman to understand why Phoebe was so upset. I wanted her to believe Phoebe. "May I ask, who is it that has been kidnapped or possibly murdered?" the woman said. Phoebe said, "My mother." "Oh, your mother. Come along then." Her voice was rather too sugary and sweet, as if she was speaking to tiny children who had asked to go to the toilet. We followed her to a little room with glass partitions. An enormous man with a huge head and neck and massive shoulders sat behind the desk. His hair was bright red and his face was covered in freckles. He did not smile as we entered.